Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Mahjong Dark Ember the 18th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Heroes and Fools, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members and Patreon patrons, and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron. Links are in the description below. You can even pick up Dragonlance media using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective only. If yours differs in any way, that's okay. Share your thoughts. If you're joining live in chat, put them there. Or if you're watching this after the fact, put them in the comments below. I don't mind it. I love having a back and forth about Dragonlance. Well, in reality, a back and forth about anything, but in this context, Dragonlance. So this is all pre-written reviews. I read every one of the stories and then made notes about the stories. And so I'm basically just going to provide you with my pre-written review of each of the short stories in this anthology. And then afterward, if there's any thoughts or anything, I'll just riff on what you guys put in the live chat, or just share extra thoughts of what I have about this collection or this trilogy of collections, the Tales of the Fifth Age. So, all right, let's dive into it. The first short story is Boojum by Janet Pack. This was a fun story to start the anthology. We're introduced by a squad of Dark Knights led by Commander Kedris Mennerling. They're needing to test out their new death machine, a cannon, and hear about a local monster called the boojum from a drunk Thistlenot Tangletoe, the Kender. Of course, we've run into Thistlenot Tangletoe before. A local in their ranks, Realthaz, confirms this monster is a tale that is supposedly living in the area. The Dark Knights take the Kender with his maps and search for the creature to test their death machine on. They get to where it should live and are confronted with the boojum, which is really this is Solamnic Knight, friend of the Kender in disguise. He eventually steps down after seeing the damage the cannon does and confronts them to fight. That is when the real boojum approaches and starts taunting them and killing them one at a time, even destroying the cannon's wheel. Some Dark Knights run off as the boojum faces off against the Solamnic Knight, and the Dark Knights try to fire the cannon one last time. It explodes, killing most of the knights, and seemingly the Solamnic as well, which Thistlenot cries over, only to discover the boojum is working with the Solamnic and they are acting. Then they go to investigate the cannon and discover that it's a patent-pending popcorn popper made by a gnome. This was a great news story featuring the Kender and Knight team, and an interesting idea that a seemingly innocuous gnome invention could end up being an actual war machine like a cannon. You know, if they meant to make a cannon, the end result would have been the same as well. It just would have blown itself up. Fun little story, and it was a great way of entering the anthology. The next one is called Tree of Life by Miranda Horner. This was an oddly intimate tale of a dying dryad and a dying knight of Takesis. The dryad's tree was dying due to the intense heat of the summer, and it wasn't getting any needed rain, which in turn meant that the tree's dryad was dying, and her movement away from the tree was severely restricted. Then a dark knight and his blue dragon crashed near the tree. The knight eventually came to and asked for help, which the dryad could not give. But the dryad asked for some of the water the knight had. He was pinned under his dead dragon. They spoke of honor and honesty and the cycle of life, and the dark knight gave her little capfuls of water, which she summarily emptied onto the exposed root of her tree. In the end, she pleaded for the water, but the knight refused. However, the knight finally accepted that he would die here, and the water wouldn't save him. So after the dryad passed out near death, the knight emptied his water skin, which gave the tree enough strength to fight for survival, reviving the dryad, who reflected on the knight's last gift. This was such a great reminder of our place as human animals amid nature. Through our DNA, we are connected to every living thing, from plants to animals on this planet. Yet we act as though we're separate from it all, witnessing it as if our actions have no impact on nature. Even when we're told that our actions have caused the 6th mass extinction, we take no meaningful action to prevent further death and destruction to the only place in this universe we know that we can live. I hope that our species will follow the Dark Knight's actions in this tale, for when we go extinct ourselves, we do what we can to ensure other life will continue. All right, the next story is called Songsayer by Giles Custer and Todd Faunestock. This story is about a bard named Dane who is traveling the land singing for his supper. He comes across a town which migrates to a temple of Paladine every year for berries and blessings. This year, a young woman's son stole berries before they were supposed to, and while the bard was singing for his supper, a mob began to form when the mother of the boy admonished the priests for trying to discipline the boy. As they haven't healed or done anything for the people since the Chaos War, the mob started moving to the priests when the bard stepped in and tried to sing of the heroes of the lance to pacify the crowd, and it only turned the mob against him. He was saved by a large warrior who rode them to safety. He told the bard to sing songs of current heroes, not past wars and events, lifting up spirits with modern tales of heroism. He told the bard that he was en route to kill a dragon, and the bard could accompany him. In truth, the man was going to kill a large lizard that was killing the farmer's sheep and used a poisoned pig and rock slide to kill it rather than fighting it. But when the bard questioned him about it, the warrior spoke of fighting smarter, not harder. On the way back, he convinced the bard that people needed these embellished stories to lift their spirits, and the bard came around and agreed. They were welcomed as heroes at supper when the song was sung of their victory over the dragon, and the duo decided to work together as they traveled across Ansalon. I like this story. We do need distractions in tumultuous times. I think that's why I'm burying my head in these pulp fantasy novels, to distract myself from the current state of my country and the economy. But you know what? It works most of the time, and I really appreciate the distraction. The next short story is called Gnome Body by Jeff Grubb. This is a story about two sellswords who are former Dragon Army soldiers. One is telling the other a gnome story about the gnome Rumtuggle. The truth is, Rumtuggle was a made-up gnome to explain random mishaps and theft in the Green Dragon Army. But once the gnome was invented, he took on a life of his own. Gnomes from a nearby village had learned of this Rumtuggle, and since he wasn't in their community, they believed the Green Dragon Army must have him captive. They demanded his release, and since the gnome didn't exist, they couldn't release him. So the gnomes stole the Dark Knight's cattle. This caused a massive supply problem, and when the gnomes continued to refuse to give the cattle back until Rumtuggle was released, the soldier said that he had killed Rumtuggle. This led to the gnomes catapulting the cattle back one at a time. Now the Dragon Army sent a new High Lord to the camp to deal with this gnomish threat, and they ended up fighting in the rain and fog against themselves. They ended up believing that it was gnomish sorcery that turned them against themselves, and the soldier who made it all up quit his post. It was really a fun tale about a story taking on a life of its own, and everyone willing to believe it no matter how absurd it was. When I was in high school, I had a friend convince me that he gave me drugs when really he didn't. I truly felt like I was high, and it was all the power of my mind convincing me of it. I learned then the power of our imagination, and because of that, I could actually see this story happening. It was great. All right, the next story is called The Road Home by Nancy Varian Berberick. Whoa, this was a brutal tale. It's about an assassin named Griff Rees who began his career after a man murdered his family and took him into the service of the Dark Queen before the Chaos War. Now a hired assassin renowned across the land, he's hiring a dwarf named Brock to help him with a job. They're both approached by a young woman named Olwyn Howe, who needs a guard to escort her to Haven. They refuse as they already have a job, and she shows them money and jewels, and memory strikes Griff. He immediately accepts the job, and they go the following day. They're traveling past Prayer's Eye Peak, and a band of men and goblins attack. They fight their way through and go into Darkenwood to evade them. There, they stay for a night when they're discovered again and fight the bandits off, except Olwyn dies. It turns out Olwyn is the daughter of the man that killed Griff's family, and Olwyn's daughter, Kay, the baby, is now the only way for the two assassins to get the man in Haven. They take the baby and over time work through Darken Wood into Haven. They locate Egil Adair, who used to be named Ashguth, as Griff knew him. They relay that his daughter's death and produce the granddaughter. Griff calls him by his old name, and recognition, then fear, sets into the man's eyes. He pleads for his life, and Griff is relishing the moment, then eventually murders the man. He ends up taking the child to Estwild and raising her there. His pain and loss of his family finally abated as he cared for this new child without a family. There was a time when I thought he was going to kill the child, but I really like the trope that innocent children can soften even the hardest men's hearts, especially men who lost their souls as children, who can then see a vicarious life in the young child. It was a bit of a long-winded story, but I appreciated it nonetheless. The next story is Noblesse Oblige by Paul B. Thompson. This was a crazy story where characters kept swapping around, and it was a bit much. Roder, a stable boy but presenting as a knight of Takesis, is delivering a dispatch from one lord to another. He comes across a woman dressed as a man who tells him bandits have taken his sister. The knight goes after the bandits with this boy and is captured by the bandits in the middle of the night. The merchant is revealed to be Lord Sandys, the leader of one of the two brigand groups in the area. He is also a she. She believes Roder is a spy, as his dispatch doesn't have any legible words on it. Roder has no idea about any of it and tries to break free as knights charge in and arrest Lord Sandy's gang and some of the other rival gangs. They're all taken back to the castle, and it's revealed that Roder was distracted. As Teffin is revealed to be a female and Lord Sandys, she and her men are going to be killed on the morrow. She praises Roder, his lord mocks as nothing but a stable boy, and this upsets Roder. The next day, Sandys escapes and is headed off by Roder, who tells her that he is letting her go because of what she said. She kisses him and runs into the forest, saying that she will see him again. This story set up a whole lot of potential tales. I really loved it. While it was obvious that the merchant was Lord Sandys from the beginning, her being a girl and her sister being a boy, and the knight Roder being a stable boy was all too pointless and seemed to make the story muddier than it needed to be. However, it did make me want to read more about Roder and Sandy. All right, the next short story is called Much Ado About Magic by Kevin James Cage. This is a fun little tale. It starts with a master wizard named Laudus and his apprentice, Sedgwick, preparing to go to the Tower of High Sorcery for a conclave to discuss the missing magic. Then a kender appears at the door, and Laudus tells Sedgwick to get rid of him. The kender, Halavar, wizard slayer, says that he destroyed magic and that he kills wizards. He has 3 spellbooks to prove it. While the apprentice is trying to figure out how the kender knows about the council to tell him that he is the reason magic is gone, a cannon explodes and a ball hits the tower. Gnomes come wheeling in, saying that they captured magic in a gnomish device, and that is why magic is gone. They all reveal that they learned about the conclave from a drunk wizard. The kender and the gnomes argue about who is right when a gully dwarf appears, claiming that she had magic, and hands over a dead frog. Now all 3 begin fighting, and Laudus appears, sending a smoke bomb out which pacifies the beings, and his apprentice is hauled inside to get a scolding. When he returns, he tells them all that he truly appreciated their help, and that they would have to all study really hard together to determine where magic went, forsaking their wanderlust, gully dwarf stew, and gnomish life quests in the process. One by one, each creature politely declines and leaves. When they're all gone, the master arrives with a horse and they head off to the conclave. It's just a short, fun little moment that showcases the personalities of the 3 races perfectly and puts them in the age of mortals in a delightful way. The next short story is called A Pinch of This, a Dash of That by Nick O'Donohoe. This is a continuation of the story from the preceding anthology about Dave the heretic cleric who escaped death with the help of Kayla, the fake pregnant woman. They're now on the road with the kender Frenny, when they came across a man named Samael who wants them to print his alchemist's handbook. He makes potions but can't pay for the printing, so they decide to enlist him in their acting troupe, and they head out to the next town. The play is written by Dave, and it's a love story, but they use the potions to make sure the audience is invested in the plays. Back at their hometown, Palak of the Joyous and Faithful Guard, who tried to have Dave executed, goes to Tulane, an assassin, to hire him to find and kill Dave. As Tulane heads out, the acting troupe begins printing the books, putting the potions together as ingredients and practicing the play. The Kender accidentally misprints the handbook so that the customers all mix the potions incorrectly and have random reactions to it as the play begins. Tulane arrives in the final act and attacks Dave as the whole troupe attacks him, and the audience watches as if it were part of the play, reacting crazily due to the potions that they all took. In the end, Tulane has a potion of love blown into his face and falls for a dominating woman from the crowd, and the troupe flees the city, planning on their next play and printing. It was a fun story, and I really liked it. It was a continuation of another story that I felt needed more. This certainly gave it more, and I hope there is yet another short story in the third anthology of this trilogy. All right, the next short story is called The Perfect Plan by Linda P. Baker. This story involves, Demiel, a young woman who is trying to get the affection of a man named Krynn, who she has been in love with since childhood. Krynn has loved a girl named Taya, who has been absent, presumed dead. Demiel recovered a magical staff from a gray wizard and has been using its magic to help her try to get Quinn's attention. She helps clear a mine that is collapsed by Erican's army, and once it's clear, she will use the staff and Krynn will love her. That's her plan, anyway. Then, one day, Taya shows up, but she is broken, nearly dead. Krynn immediately goes to pay her attention and care for her, as Demiel is furious. Taya used to be a mean girl to her in youth. She takes her turn to watch over Taya and sees how brutally she was being treated in the war. Eventually, Taya wakes and tells Demiel that she saw her in the war, how she had fought for Erican's side and picked up a gray wizard's staff and continued fighting, inspiring everyone around her. She said that she wouldn't tell anyone, but she wanted Demiel to kill her. She's going to die anyway and wants to be put out of her misery. It takes a lot, but eventually Demiel uses the magic of her staff, the last magic it held, to kill Taya. She walked away and sat beside a fire, and then Krynn came. He told her that Taya was dead and started laughing, saying that he killed her. He wished she was dead. He had always loved Demiel, but he saw how jealous it made Demiel, so he continued the ruse. His perfect plan to open the mine and become the town's leader with Demiel at his side was nearly complete. But Demiel's perfect plan of getting Krynn opening the mine was not part of being his second. She told him that she had to think and then left. And this is great, how one person's machinations are nearly aligned with another, but doesn't want to be subservient to the other. She knew what she wanted until she got it. And quite frankly, Krynn is a shit-ass for treating her like that their whole lives. I would be perfectly fine with Demiel walking away from him. I enjoyed the love triangle story, but it was much longer than it had to be. The next story is called The Thief in the Mirror by Richard A. Knack. Now, this was a wonderful story. Mendel is a black-robe wizard losing his power in the Age of Mortals. He used existing magical items to bring him power as he drains them. One day, a thief steals from him, and he sets a trap with a black-robed friend. The female offers the thief Vandor a job, and it leads him into Mendel's trap, making him a specter in a mirror. He uses the promise of returning him to his body to force the specter Vandor to steal magic items for him, and he can now live in any reflection and travel at his master's whim. He is set after the Akron crest, a magical brooch held by the red-robe Thorin Prester. As Vandor is searching, he finds the brooch being used as a hairpin on a child. The child's mother and Prester's wife gave it to her. Vandor takes it, but the child wakes and nearly takes it back. But when she sees that Vandor starts burning up when out of the mirror, she lets him go. As he's traveling back, the brooch vanishes. When he returns empty-handed, he is punished and is promised that if he finds the brooch in one day, he will get his body back. If not, he will be destroyed. So he goes back to Prester's home, believing the brooch to be gone, but finds it in the girl's hair again. She relays the fairy tale about ancient wizards of evil and heroes of good, and says Vander is like the good knight, and Mendel is like an evil wizard. She gives Vander the brooch to alleviate his torment, and when he delivers it, Mendel says his body was destroyed 30 years ago. Then the child wizard begins attacking Mendel through the brooch. This infuriates Vander, and he tries to attack Mendel as well, to no effect, but it distracts him long enough for Mendel to be pulled into the brooch, and then it disappears, presumably, back to the child. Now Vander is free as a ghost to wander. It was a nice tale by Knack, who, when he deviates from Huma and Kaz, proves that he still has great stories to tell. All right, the next short story is called Reorx Steps Out by Jean Rabe. A Seavac draconian leaps out of hiding and attacks a dwarf who exclaims, "Great Reorx!" as the draconian kills him. He needs the dwarf's visage to continue through the land. He passes into a town called Nidarbard, and everyone is stinking drunk from a festival. The mayor is totally wasted, and Akender asks the dwarf if he is Reorx. He recalls the dwarf whose body he took over, saying Reorx, and then replies, "Yes, I'm Reorx." This causes a massive drunken series of dwarves and Kender asking him if he is truly the god Reorx, and he says that yes, he is, but he has to go and get the other gods. They're all too drunk to appreciate the urgency and praise him, begging him to taste their food and ale and dance. The Seavac is thirsty and hungry and relents. He has time before his form shifts back, so he indulges. Too much. Then, two dwarves get stuck in a hive of honey, and the town clamors for him to save them. He reluctantly goes into the hive and saves one, then on the way out, kills the other, assumes his form, and then tells the town that Reorx saved them and left to free the other gods. It was a clever story that brought about the realities of draconians in a very entertaining way and leaves you wanting more. Just one more story proving Jean Rabe is a good author. All right. The next story is called The Bridge by Douglas Niles. This is also a continuation. This was a touching continuation of the story The Last Thane, as the remaining Hylar clan leaves Thorbarden. They come to a massive ravine that, on the far side, has a bunch of Nidar dwarves guarding it. Tarn, Belicia, and Barzak are surveying the bridge and decide to go talk with the dwarves to see if they can pass the bridge. But the Nidar refuse, bringing up old rivalries from the cataclysm between hill and mountain dwarves. Barzak wants to just rush over and kill the hill dwarves, but Tarn refuses. Then Barzak suggests a duel on Reorx's name. Whoever wins decides the outcome. They approach the hill dwarves again and give the suggestion. They accept it. The battle is evenly matched between Barzak and Katzin, and just when Katzin is about to die, he crushes Barzak's head with his hammer. Belicia breaks down in tears, and Tarn comforts her, not sure what will come of them. But then Katzin returns a necklace to Tarn from Barzak's corpse and throws his hammer over the bridge with tears in his own eyes. He allows the Hylar to pass. Now, this is such a touching tale, which showed that even the most long-lasting blood rivalries can be tossed aside if you just want to do it. There's no reason to hate others due to something that happened hundreds of years before, and there's no reason the death of a good dwarf should condemn others. I really enjoyed this. All right, the next short story is Gone by Roger E. Moore. Wow, this was a truly fantastic story, a real horror story. It's all written as a memoir of a minotaur named Redhorn. He was hired by a human named Drommel who wanted to go to the island of Enstar and search for treasure there, knowing that there was a Lord Dwerlin who was wealthy. The island is uninhabited, but it has shadow wights there, which erase you from the universe, hence the horror story. And to counter them, Drommel had supposed Dragonlance spearheads that he put around everyone's necks as necklaces. He had a shipwright build him an underwater boat, a gnome worked on inventing, and hired on a kender named Twig, a Kaganesty named Hunter, and a gnome named Pate. They all left and arrived at Enstar without problem. They started to explore, and the gnome was disappeared by the wights, causing confusion. Then they found the keep of Lord Dwerlin, and the Kaganesty was disappeared. The story is so great as it presents the confusion of the missing people perfectly and the horror of the survivors. The 3 remaining are chased out of the keep by wights and make a massive bonfire to keep them away. The Minotaur gives Twig the Kender some herbs that knock her out to prevent her from rambling, as they are all terrified of the wights surrounding them, whispering to them constantly. She doesn't wake until the end of the story. Then Drommel leaves Red a note about how he's sorry for bringing them here and he needs to atone for it. But he's disappeared too, and Red has no idea how they got to the ship or who the author of the letter is. Finally, the Minotaur leaves Twig and disappears himself, and the last entry is the Kender waking to find herself on a strange ship in the middle of the ocean. I really love this story, as it highlights the terror of the Chaos War wonderfully, and how there are places you have to avoid, or else. It was so good. It was so good. All right, and the final story of this collection, To Convince the Righteous of the Right, by Margaret Weis and Don Perrin. This was also a wonderful story. A welcome return to Kang and the first Dragon Army field engineers. They had just retrieved the draconian females from Thorbarden, and they're all keeping them in sacks to protect them. They let them out once and nearly lost them all. Kang is overprotective and keeps them safe. They're traveling to a rumored city that could be their home once they clear out the undead. Suddenly, goblins attack. It seems that the goblin commander has sent them after the draconians, a move that is very uncommon. The draconian scouts report that there's a temple of Paladine nearby, and with the gods gone, they decide to take shelter and defense within it. It turns out that there's a basement, and that there's also a half a dozen sisters of Paladine in the basement. Kang is frustrated as the female draconian children are acting oddly and not eating, so he thinks the women in the cellar will watch babies for him while they defend the temple from goblins. I'm losing my place in my own words. The sisters are not having any of it, believing it to be a trick or that they're prisoners, but Kang makes it very clear that they're not prisoners. One of the sisters, Marcel, starts to question if they should be so vehemently against the draconians. She suggests that the babies should be allowed to play and run, and that may be why they're acting strangely. She shares that her own father was overprotective, and that's how she came to be here. Then Slith goes on a raid, kills the goblin general, takes his form, and leads the goblins away. Sister Hannah threatens to kill the babies and is stopped when Kang tries to trade his life for the babies, and Marcellus stops Hannah from killing him. Then they let the children play and move on, leaving the Sisters of Paladine to their own fate. This was a great story that frames fatherhood perfectly for me. I do everything I can to protect my daughter, even to the point of nearly smothering her. But her mother, my wife, always warns me against it and gives her space to individuate and experience life away from us. I was never this overprotective with my son, but for some insane reason, I have to tell myself to stop being so overprotective with my daughter. So I get Kang's fears at least a little bit, and I love that this story is a focus on that and religious conviction. That you can be on one side of good and still act in evil. Again, this rings true to our real world. In all, I would highly recommend this collection. I am so pleased with the Age of Mortals storytelling in this series of anthologies. I cannot wait to start the next one. So, what do you guys have to say here? Still a few stories left, but overall good collection. It's been a letdown compared to Relics and Omens. Oh, I don't think so at all. It's not as good as some of those stories, but it's got overall a great collection of stories in my opinion. You love the story about revenge, the boy whose family was killed by the Knights of Takhisis. Babies need to be spared for the endless cycle of violence we see in the real world to grow and do better. It's such a difficult conversation to have. Because we have to face the reality that not everyone can be a good parent. But there's no way to really know if you can be a good parent or not until you are a parent. And we have a lot of people who want to force people to be parents instead of allowing them the option of opting out of being a parent, which then puts children in if they're unable to have an abortion, then it puts children into a horrible home situation in most cases, or it puts them up for adoption, in which case they're in a system that doesn't seem to really care about them, and they either grow up in the system or they're farmed out to a family who you hope doesn't abuse them, but you never know. The reality of human beings having the choice on whether or not they should have children, and if they are abusive to those children, knowing that that behavior will probably then be repeated by that abused child, is a terrifying notion. And we should always err on the side of a woman's right to choose, in my opinion. That is all to say, in this story, I was very pleased with the outcome. The man who was, his whole family was murdered, and then he ended up taking the child who had no family of her own anymore, and then he raised it, and then presumably they had a wonderful life, is just a great outcome out of what could potentially be a friggin' nightmare. And so I thought it was a really challenging story and very brave to tell that type of a story in a fantasy setting where you could easily just go for stupid fantasy tropes and avoid it altogether. All right. Melswick, thanks for tuning in live. How you doing, man? Heroes and Fools is the same thing. Deathstalker 1983. I don't know that I've ever seen Deathstalker. I've seen like stills of it, I think. I'm really just going off of memory. But I don't think I've seen it. I'm going to have to go check it. Proton Potions. I have no idea. I've got to look it up. Awesome video as usual. Thanks, man. Appreciate you turning in, Tarek. Great, you're making a lot of new videos about the Fifth Age. First of all, I'm going through the entire novel collection. And so I just finished Chaos War a little bit ago, and now I'm in Fifth Age, and I'm loving the Fifth Age stories. I'm like really, really good. The authors that we're seeing repeated over and over again, at this point, have had so much time to hone their craft that the stories are just getting better and better. Not necessarily because of the age that it's written in, but more, I think, because the authors are just getting better. They're becoming masters of their craft. And the stories are just really good. I mean, you compare these collections to any of the tales, and it's night and day. How, as far as like quality of writing and storytelling, it's really, really good. Any chance you will review the Age of Mortals campaign for 3rd edition? Yeah, I mean, my Tyranny of Dragons campaign right now that I'm doing live actual play on every other Saturday is set at the end of the Age of Mortals. As far as the campaign source book, I'm actually going to be starting with the 1st edition modules and source books. I've already done a couple of them as reviews before I go through the 2nd edition and then the 3rd edition and so on. So I will get to it eventually, but it will probably take a little bit of time. But I'm a big fan of the Age of Mortals campaign setting, both before the Dragon Overlords, during the Dragon Overlords, and after the Dragon Overlords. I think each time period has a really great, I don't know, there's just some really great challenges about those eras. Each of them have very different ones. And the game systems that they're all set in, from Saga system to 2nd edition to 3rd edition to now 5th edition in my games, are just ripe with great storytelling. And I really, really enjoy it. And that's not to say that I don't love the War of the Lance era, because I really do. Like the post-Blue Ladies War, pre-Summer of Chaos era, I think is probably one of my favorites of all time. But I'm really enjoying the Age of Mortals too. All right, Mels, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in, Melswick. You have a question about Taladas. Yeah, go ahead and ask. Douglas Niles, I like most of his stuff. Yeah, I do too. Douglas Niles, he's got some stinkers early on. But he's, again, he, like the other authors, have been honing their craft. And I really, really enjoy watching the evolution of the quality of writing. I think it's a lot of fun to witness. Noah, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. You love the Kinslayer Wars? Yeah. Who didn't? Great trilogy, right? I got a review on this channel of it. I really loved revisiting it when I read it the 2nd time. So you stopped, Thalic, thanks for tuning in. You stopped reading DL when you had read all Dragonlance. That was many years ago. You read all the books? Wow. I mean, I would stop reading when I ran out too. I've been thinking about that recently because I've been going through the books pretty rapidly recently. And I'm thinking, well, what do I do when I am done? I mean, I will have to move on to the source books, obviously, the role-playing game source books. And so that'll probably then take the majority of my focus of just reading through all of the modules and adventures and source material and just giving straight up reviews of it. But I will eventually run out. And it'll be interesting when that happens and how this channel evolves, how I'll then approach Dragonlance after having gone through everything. But again, that is years away, so I'm not really worried about it. It's just an interesting thought experiment on what's going to happen at that point. You haven't picked it up yet, back up yet, even though they made a new era. Yeah, the Destinies trilogy, if you haven't read those, I would recommend it. There's a fair amount of nostalgia, there's a fair amount of frustration, and there's a fair amount of nonsense. But there's also a complete wipe of the timeline. And so whether you like that or not, I think is less important than reading it and seeing it happen, because I think that's the fun part. Drummer Madrid, thanks for tuning in. You love the bridge, such an emotional tale. Oh my gosh, yes. It was so... When I had to read it a few times when he came back and smashed the dude's head with the hammer, because I was like, dude was dead. How did he get out of that? And I swore there was going to be a story beat, because he was like holding the necklace of his mom, and he made this note about his mom went out during the War of the Lance and never came back, but then was supposedly living with Nidar dwarves somewhere. I thought that the man he faced off with was going to be his brother from his mom's side, so a half brother. I thought that was the story that they were going to tell. It would have been an easy way of sort of sliding it in, and I think it would have added a bit of emotional resonance and explained why he was crying at the end of it. Because, when he did kill the man, the dwarf, and he handed the necklace to Thrain, or whatever his Thrain, whatever his name was, outside of the idea of, oh, I see how emotionally connected you all were with him and how it affected you when I killed him, that I am now going to become an emotional wreck, didn't really seem to play into that character in that moment for me reading it, though I still felt the emotional resonance of it. It would have landed harder if he would have handed them the necklace and then pulled his own out and said, my mom made this for me. And then he realized that he killed his brother afterward. That would have been like, oh my gosh. So I thought it was a lost option of a really great twist of the end of a story, but it was still a really great tale. And I loved I was at the end of the last thing when I reviewed it, I was like, I want to know what happens next. It just says they go to Thor or to Qualnesty. They were headed to Qualnesty to help get shelter with the elves, not knowing that the elves are dealing with this shit too. And then this happens. This is exactly what I love, is these short stories, continuation of stories that were already told, really creating this beautiful tapestry of what's going on in the world while all of the saga stories are happening. That's what I love reading. And this did such a great job of it. Let's see. You have the Time of Dragons box set and the 3 novels by Chris Pearsons. I love those. Is there anything more on Taladas? There are comic series for Taladas. I have them all as performances on this channel, but it's the DC comic line. There's a point where Reva Silvercrown is whisked away on a ship to Taladas, and there she has to deal with a bunch of adventures and stuff in Taladas. And while it's nowhere near as good as the Taladas trilogy by Chris Pearson, which is chef's kiss, beautiful Dragonlance storytelling, it's still fun because you get to see visuals of Taladas in a lot of really cool locations that we've never really seen action visuals from before. Now it's all DC comic era, type artwork, which, if you don't like comics, then you probably wouldn't enjoy it as much, but I personally think it's great. And so you get to see a lot of really great, locations all around Taladas with all these great little adventures. It's a lot of fun if you haven't read them before. And, you can find free versions online, or you can go to used bookstores and get the used versions, or secondhand markets like eBay. But I do have them on the channel for free that you can watch and see the comics, flipping page to page as I do my best to narrate with voices and stuff, the action that's happening. So definitely check them out. All right, let's see. Talos is so awesome. There's a lot of comics, campaigns, best there, a supplement about Minotaurs and a supplement with adventures based on the novels in the box set. Yeah, so there's the Talos. There's the supplement called Other Lands. And then there's the Minotaurs, or I think it's called the Minotaurs or something like that. But it's also a supplement, like Other Lands supplement. So those two supplements with Time of the Dragon are the gaming products. And then you have the trilogy of novels, and then you have a whole bunch of comics. So there's a bunch of stuff. But the reality is when TSR put out Time of the Dragon, when second edition was released, they did it because they thought people were tired of the Ansalon War of the Lance era storytelling. And so they released the box set that's completely recontextualizes Dragonlance, and the fans did not like it. By and large, they stayed away from it. And so they ended up releasing the Tales of the Lance box set to bring everyone back to Ansalon and show that in second edition, you could still play Dragonlance without reverting to the first edition content. It did wonderfully well. And so they continued on with their saga system after second edition lifespan sort of went away. But there's tons of modules set up in Taladas. I forgot about these until just now. All of the second edition, that's not true. There's like 2 or 3 series of modules in second edition that are set specifically in Taladas. So you've got the 2 game supplements, you've got the box set, and you've got the novels and the comics and trilogies of game modules that will go through a whole bunch of stuff, take you all the way to Lunitary, fighting and riding dragons. I mean, all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot out there in second edition for Taladas if that's your bag and you want to explore it. There's also it's like a starter set adventure set in Taladas that the TSR released for Dragonlance. It's a module with pre-made characters, but it's meant as an introductory of how to play second edition AD&D. But it's all set in Taladas and D&D in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons second edition. And it provides everything for brand new players who've never experienced Taladas before and Dungeons & Dragons second edition to then learn about both at the same time while playing through the module. So if you haven't done it yet, definitely check it out. It's one of those like bucket list items on my notes on all my stuff here, where it's one of the games I want to play through because I want to know about the story, and it would be a fun way of reintroducing people to second edition and Taladas who may have skipped over it back in the day when it was originally released. So there's a ton of stuff, so keep that in mind. It's weird how many stories the past 2 anthologies had about printing presses and modern book binding, where they're trying to showcase the technology advances since the War of the Lance. Yeah, I think some of the authors are trying to push Dragonlance into a more technological future, and some other authors are just like, no, we're going to stay where we are. We are not going to be progressing. Thank you, Thalek. That is a very high compliment. While I really appreciate it, I don't believe it. But I really do appreciate you saying it. That makes me feel really good. I feel like a failure most of the time, to be quite honest. What was the module on Taladas called? There's a bunch of them. Let me, how am I going to, let me see. I've got a couple places I can look really quick. There's a great resource called TSR Archive. It's tsrarchive.com. It doesn't have the actual modules, but it has the names of them. So you can always look up products for every edition of D&D and a bunch of other systems and stuff. But it has it also broken down by campaign world. So for Dragonlance, it's Taladas the Minotaurs, Other Lands, Time of the Dragon box set, Dragon Dawn, Dragon Night, Dragon's Rest, In Search of Dragons, Dragon Magic, and Dragon Keep. And then I think it's New Beginnings. Yeah, I think the module is the New Beginnings module that is meant to be an introduction. I'm going off memory here, and I'm sort of, I mean, I have it. I can just look it up, like open it. But yeah, it's literally one module which is meant to be an introduction to Taladas and stuff. So let me see, Dragonlance modules, New Beginnings. Yeah, this is it. So it has creating characters, tips for beginning players, tips on role playing, and what would you do, and then it presents the first adventure. And it has all the character sheets for all the characters and stuff. So it's called New Beginnings by Mark Akers. The product number is DLS1. And there's DLS 2, 3, and 4, but they're all set on Anslon, and they're not meant as an introduction to D&D at all. And it's basically Tree Lords, Oak Lords, and Wild Elves, focusing on the 3 types of elves from Sylvanisty, Quilinisty, and Kaganisty after the War of the Lance, where they're going back to Sylvanisty, trying to protect it. It talks about how Kith Cannon actually knew that the Grey Gem of Gargath came into Quilinisty and hid in like a Slaw Mori. And one of the modules, I think it's Oak Lords, you have to go in and find the Grey Gem and stop it. The Kaganisty one, Wild Elves, actually has Drow in it. And you go on these underground dungeons, sort of like finding and fighting Drow and stuff. Tons of really cool stuff. I've just never played through them, and it's one of those things where I just don't have enough time to play all of the modules that I really want to play. But in any case, that is neither here nor there. Definitely check that stuff out. That is going to do it for this review of Heroes and Fools, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. What did you think of the anthology? Did you connect with any of these stories? And finally, would you ever play a one-shot facing off against shadow wights? After that horror story, I really want to do a one-shot. Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to thank creator patron Aaron Hardy and developer patron Chris Androu. I would also like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga. And until next time, Slán Javar.